Economics Unbound. It's just gone 9:30 Central African time. I'm Frances Hurd, standing in for Tandeka Ngobule Mbeki. And tonight we're looking at the festive shopping frenzy, crazy credit as well, aren't we, Nana?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to it. Yes, Francis, with the festive season around the corner, we look into the consumer spending habits during the festive season and also look at some of the tips on how to avoid overspending during this period.
Well, Nana, Wonga, South Africa, is saying that December, this period, notoriously expensive as people go on holiday, buy Christmas gifts, indulge in festive treats and enjoy time out with family and friends. There's always that temptation to overspend. And we haven't even got to Black Friday yet. That will be the theme and the general festive season, but not bad for the ailing economy if it's done right, Nana.
Last year, the company created a survey to help us understand how South Africans celebrate the festive season, as well as how they cope with additional expense. The survey revealed that South Africans between the ages of 18 and 65 were willing to spend 5,706 each over the festive season. This means 200 billion rands would have been pumped into the economy during that period.
Well, the same survey revealing that 50% of South Africans were relying on their 13th check or year-end bonus to pay for the festive cheer. More than 50 also contributed to a stokvel to supplement their year-end bonus. So that's the good news, savings. But spending on credit is the bad news we'll be looking at tonight. 18% indicated that they would need to borrow money to cover their additional costs.
Yes, Francis. However, things might be different this year. The latest statistics on retail sales from Statistics SA show little growth every month since the beginning of the year.
Let's wait and see, Nana. So this time of the year is really important for retail sales, and retailers play psychological tricks. We know that, to make sure we spend as much as possible. October, November, December are said to account for nearly 30% of annual sales. So the tills will be ringing over time, Nana.
Reports suggest that Black Friday will probably become even more important, with retailers putting more effort into it. Retailers are responding to the opportunity by advertising discounts for longer than just that Friday. While some try to stretch it to a week, some try to stretch the day to a full month, advertising discounts for the whole of Black November in its online store.
Yep, Nana, so let's start with Black Friday, and many of those sales have already begun. Last year it was a buying frenzy. 3 billion rand spent in one day, with websites crashing under the strain of deals and keen customers. Data suggests 2 out of 3 consumers in South Africa participated in Black Friday shopping at some point. Let's take a look and then we'll speak to FNB.
Black Friday started in the United States in the 1960s and gained popularity in South Africa. It started with only few retailers, and now many of them are jumping on the bandwagon due to high sales volumes. Some consumers take advantage of the day to do Christmas shopping, but consumers are urged not to get carried away.
The best advice that I can give anybody with regards to Black Friday is plan on what you want to buy, look at what it's going to cost, leave your cards, your bank cards at home, just take the amount of cash that item costs with you and go and buy it, so that you can control yourself and manage yourself with regards to all the temptations going on around you in the shops, because that will happen.
Many retailers are even offering consumers credit to buy items on Black Friday, and some banks are increasing credit card limits ahead of this day. You are likely to pay interest of up to 22% per annum for your credit card, especially if you do not repay the balance within a specified period of time. Consumers are urged to scrutinize what's on offer to ensure that they are getting value for money, and to use cash rather than credit for their purchases.
Unfortunately, a lot of people have extra money in these times in the form of bonuses, which is great, but they use this money wrongly in the sense that they're buying stuff that they do not really need because of the fact that it's on special. And the other problem that we're seeing is that the retailers are offering credit to consumers to buy these goods, and that makes it possible for a lot of people to buy things even though they do not have the money to pay for it. And that also in itself sends out the wrong message to consumers.
Consumers are urged to only buy necessities and to avoid spending their hard-earned cash on things they did not budget for. Overspending on Black Friday could lead to over-indebtedness, especially if you are using credit for your purchases, and learn to differentiate between needs and wants. Debt Rescue says they expect the number of people applying for relief to increase tremendously in January, and that this is mainly as a result of overspending on Black Friday and during the festive season. With January just around the corner, some consumers will be forced to dig deep into their pockets to buy school uniforms and pay for school fees.
Well, considering previous years, we definitely see an increase with regards to people applying for debt review because they became over-indebted, because usually over the festive season and now especially because of Black Friday, people spend more money than they can really afford, and that causes them to become over-indebted, and they do not always realize that there is still a long month ahead, and that is January.
All right, to discuss further, we're joined by Esther Ush, who is the product head money management at First National Bank. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So Black Friday began in the United States. It's picked up here. Do you agree it's something of a phenomenon right now in South Africa?
It's become such a hype. I mean, we've been hearing radio ads and TV ads about Black Friday since October. Beware of Black Friday coming, and it's coming. And it really is going...
It's even delayed the Christmas trees and things like that.
Yeah, because I mean, traditionally the Christmas trees would sort of go up in October. That's getting delayed, as you said, now to Black Friday.
Yeah.
So it is getting this massive hype that we're having at the moment.
Okay, so obviously you also gauge that tendency to overspend. And the Reserve Bank today actually saying that unsecured lending is becoming a systemic risk to the financial sector in South Africa. So that is serious. But let's just start with a few of the stats you've got. 2 in 3 people, or 2 in 3 consumers taking part. What's the data saying?
So it's 2 in 3 consumers are going to take part in Black Friday in some form, whatsoever. Whether they're going to use credit for that or not is their thing. But we always advise that when you want to take part in Black Friday, make sure that you've got the money to do it. Don't just go and spend.
Okay, and we'll talk about that. But nearly 2,000% increase in spending.
Absolutely, in one day. One day. It's literally the spending in one day is equivalent to most of the lead up in the festive season.
Yeah.
It just spikes immensely, and it starts at 12 o'clock at night.
And do you expect it to be that big tomorrow? I mean, is there more hype this year, or
so we've definitely,
because we know the economy is so constrained as well.
It's also a lot easier. So there's a lot of online sales that are starting at 12 o'clock tonight. So I know of some people that are literally waiting at their computers, going to go online at 1 minute past 12 to try and get these deals. So I do think that there is going to be quite a substantial spending.
Okay, so the overspending, I mean, did you see that last year? Can you see people taking on bigger credit limits, trying to do what they can?
People tend to get sort of mixed up in this hype, so they're going to do anything. They go into this whole frenzy of, I need this big TV and all of that. And if they can't afford it with cash, they do tend to go for the credit, which is something they want to avoid, obviously.
Are the banks being very responsible? Because presumably, if you are worthy of credit, you should get credit. If you're not, you shouldn't. We heard from TransUnion that 6 months down the line, sometimes people are defaulting.
No, they are. So the banks are trying their best to sort of limit the credits that are going out there. But ultimately, the responsibility is with the consumers, if they are given credit, to be responsible with that, to use it for the right things.
Yeah. What's your advice? I mean, presumably don't go into credit for something like
absolutely. So, you know, the thing is about Black Friday is you can get some really good deals, but don't go in there without a game plan. Make sure that you've got a list. So sit now, go and think, what are the things that I do need? What are the things that I do need for the household, the necessities? Actually have a little bit of a shopping list. Put up a budget, stick to that budget. If you hit that budget, stay there. Don't go any further. Don't go over that. And also, we've got great technology these days. If you're standing in a store and you see something that looks like a good deal or perceived to be a good deal, quickly Google it. Have a look and see if it is really such a good deal. Do your research.
Yeah. Well, how many people are doing research? I mean, we say South Africans are very price sensitive, but we've been looking at sales that don't look like sales, or price manipulation. It looks like some items going up dramatically just so they can come down on Black Friday.
So there has been rumours and there has been reports of that, of people actually fictitiously moving those prices up leading up into Black Friday, so that those discounts are double-digit discounts. So that's why it's important that you actually do your research throughout the entire year, that TV that you're looking at, all those consumables that you're looking at, is actually a good deal.
Because it's online, so you can catch them. we caught somebody yesterday.
Absolutely.
What about the retailers themselves? So some of them weren't particularly enamoured with Black Friday a few years ago, specifically because Christmas is still to come. That's when we used to have to spend anyway. But could there still be a boom for retailers?
So they've actually seen, and this is the research that we've got at the moment, is that there's been a shift in the spending habits, that people are actually now spending more money in Black Friday and not necessarily so much money leading up to the Christmas and the festive spend. So there's been a complete shift in the spending. So whether the retailers are going to miss out on Black Friday if they haven't advertised, probably, because there's more than likely not going to be that much money left for spending for festive.
Does that put pressure on their profits?
That's something that you'll need to ask them and an economist.
Yeah.
But probably.
What about credit card fraud, things like that? Because we hear that there's a lot of phishing attacks at the moment, where you're offered a sale or a good deal, then you're asked for your...
Absolutely. The volume of transactions and everything, you're going to get a couple of thieves and a couple of opportunistic people coming out. So those normal standard safety mechanisms are about there. Where you can try and pay with a credit card, make sure that no one can see your PIN number. Be very, very careful about clicking on links in emails. Be careful of those phishing scams. And again, as always, if it sounds too good to be true, click on this link and you'll win so much money. Be very careful of that.
Okay, so go tomorrow. Let's wrap up this. To buy things that you would buy anyway. It's hard for me, all my wants and needs get mixed up.
Very much be careful of that, just that buying for the sake of buying because it seems like a good deal. Have that list, go and buy the necessities, but don't go and buy 3 years worth of necessities, because buying too much bulk is also got a negative effect.
Yeah, you can forget about it in the store.
Absolutely. And also another thing is, don't just go and buy a lot of bad quality stuff. Buy good quality stuff that is going to last you over the long term.
Yeah. All right, thank you for that advice. And we continue with this theme. That was Esther Ush for Product Head Money Management at First National Bank. We take a short break. We'll continue focusing on Black Friday specifically, looking at TransUnion. And we saw last year that after a few months, people were going into default on new accounts they had taken out specifically around Black Friday. And then we take a bigger look at festive season spending. Stay with us. Welcome back to Economics Unbound this Thursday night with a focus on the festive frenzied shopping spree and crazy credit. We're still with Black Friday and we brought this number to you earlier. So if you're wondering how much South Africans spent last Black Friday, it was 3 billion rand in one single shopping day, according to Bank Serve Africa. That was up nearly 16% from the previous year. And if anything, the hype has intensified. We were just talking about that, so we'll see what happens on Black Friday tomorrow. But there are warnings that Black Friday can lead to a black hole of debt. Don't put yourself dangerously in the red, the experts say. Well, we spoke to TransUnion that has crunched some of the numbers from last year. Let's take a look at those. The Credit Bureau saying that new accounts opened in the week of Black Friday were up 37% compared to the same week a month before. Credit card limits were increased as well. There was a nearly 50% increase in retail installment accounts, normally for furniture and electronics. There was a 30% increase in retail revolving accounts. Those are normally used for electronics, homeware and general appliances. But the problem is that down the line, some of these retail revolving accounts were in arrears. For more earlier, I spoke to the CEO of TransUnion Africa, Lee Naik.
Well, the truth is that Black Friday is a mainstay part of the South African calendar. It was an American phenomenon for a long time, but now it's mainstay. It's an entire week of sales.
In fact, the hype is getting bigger and bigger. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I think for the last 2 years, it's gone from a single day to a single day plus Cyber Monday. Now it's an entire week.
Yeah.
And in many regards, we all look forward to Black Friday week, and we look forward to all these wonderful sales. What we have found, if you look back at last year around the same time, we found that almost 130,000 new accounts were opened in Black Friday week. Now, the truth is that most of us need credit to survive and to go about the purchase we make. I think the point you saw earlier in the data was that many folk are taking on debt that they actually can't afford. And the biggest concern for us is that you need to be judicious. And for almost half of the retail revolving accounts that opened up, half of them went bad just 6 months later. And that's quite scary.
So that means 6 months down the line, people were not able to pay back the debt they had taken on for Black Friday, basically.
That's right. So basically 6 months on, they went into a month or two of arrears already. So as it starts to creep up, as you're well aware, you start to worry about defaults and judgments. That's quite scary. That a quick decision during Black Friday week, if you're not judicious in terms of your exposure, could lead to consequences downstream.
So you're buying something you can't afford, basically.
Well, you're buying more than you can afford. And I guess there's a combination of what do you need versus what do you want. Many folk are enthralled by the many brochures they've seen today. And the question is, should you buy everything, or should you buy these one or two purchases that make sense and they are exceptionally good value for money in that week, but relative to what you can afford? There'll always be specials throughout the year, but are you buying things that will create a concern for you downstream, or are you exposing yourself too much?
And these new retail accounts, I mean, they attract interest. What sort of interest rates are we looking at? And then you've got to consider that could wipe out the discount that you're getting in the first place.
That's absolutely true. The truth, though, is that if you actually manage your credit card facility quite well, many of them actually are interest-free if you pay within a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
The trick,
usually
however,
30 days, yeah?
Correct. It's 30 days or up to 55 days in some of the banks. Now, the trick is to actually pay these accounts on time, so you actually don't have the actual debt beyond that. But as you have many credit cards, you have many worries concurrently. If you aren't monitoring your behavior, Francis, you actually start to go over that line, and it starts to snowball.
So how do you see Black Friday? I mean, is it just hype to get people to spend? Or is there value in buying big ticket items that you want to buy anyway, or perhaps need to buy? What's a want and what's a need?
Correct. Well, on a personal level, I think I've been looking at fridges and looking at televisions, right? I've got my eye on a few of them. And in a digital world where everything's on your mobile phone and on your email, you actually can shop around well in advance of Black Friday. Almost every retailer has put out their brochures today. So tomorrow I know exactly what I need versus what I want. I would love lots of things, right? But I figured out I do need a fridge, I need a new television. So that's a key thing to actually do when you think about Black Friday, is figure out what those purchases are. The biggest thing for me as the CEO of TransUnion is being aware of the information around your financial health. Now, many folk actually don't know how indebted they are. A useful stat that you didn't cover earlier is that every year, out of the 25 million people that use credit in South Africa, only 400,000 people get their free credit report from the bureaus.
Yeah.
And that's quite scary if you don't know how bad it is now.
And you
how can
do
make a
offer
good
that
call?
for free, so you can see how you are seen. But technically, nobody should give you credit if you have an appalling record.
Well, that's true. I think the truth, though, is that they are really good deals, and it's not a point about getting new credit. It's a fact that when you take on the credit, the lenders need to be more careful about giving you the credit to start with.
Yeah.
And when you have the credit, you could be good today, but if you don't service the debt, you suddenly go from the black into the red, and that's the concern we have.
And an interesting thing you said you've been looking at the prices. I mean, that seems to be solid advice. Make sure that what you're buying is actually a good deal by looking at the prices before. I mean, I put something on Twitter yesterday.
Yes.
There was an item on Take-A-Lot that seemed to double, according to somebody who was watching, a few days before Black Friday, presumably for the sales. And it was double basically what was being offered other retailers. So this is going on.
Absolutely. I think there's a truth to be told that there are many retailers looking to maximize on the hype of Black Friday. But given the world we live in, where everything's on Twitter and on Facebook and on the internet, and it's a matter of looking around and seeing what sales are around there. The best advice anybody could be told on Black Friday is figure out those one or two things you need. And actually, somebody earlier told me that on Black Friday, toilet paper's on sale. That could be a purchase you do buy on credit, but you actually pay it off over a period of time.
Yeah.
Because it could be a big item, but it could be a small item that puts you in a bad spot of trouble, right?
But presumably go with cash or go with money that you have in your bank account.
100%. When you think about the need that you have versus what I'd like and what I'd want, these are very different things. And many purchases you can actually save for over a longer period of time. And remember, credit, if not serviced well, has a cost linked to the interest rate. So you could save up for a purchase. And remember, we're now in holiday season. So we start with Black Friday. We then go into the holiday season all the way well into January. So it's going to start to be really good deals along the way. If you can't afford it now, maybe wait, maybe save, maybe buy one and not two right now and wait for the next round to come along.
And those trends, are they the same? Do people take on credit in January or do they use money at least that they've got for the January sales? Some believe they could be even better than the Black Friday.
So we've been monitoring the actual data on consumer spending for the last 17 years. Over the last 2 years, there's been a specific spike in November linked to Black Friday. So we know that this one specific week can trigger sales for the retailers, but also really good value for consumers, but also potentially bad debt. It starts to taper off as you get beyond January, but over the next 3 months, it's a very, very tough time for a consumer that will be confronted by really good deals. So being judicious and being aware of what you're buying will be key to your success.
So let's just end, just some general advice. If somebody's thinking of using their credit card limit, maxing it out tomorrow, just what's your words of caution?
Words of caution is get that free credit report. It sounds so simple. It sounds scary maybe, which is why people don't do it, right? But knowing what you are indebted for is such power when you're making choices on purchasing. Call the contact center, go to our website, get the free report. That's the first bit of advice. Secondly, like you said earlier, it's easy to shop around for what you may like, what you may want, but what you may need, and then decide what's the one or two things you really need to buy tomorrow and over the next week versus things you want to save for. Some of these items may seem really good today, but if you don't read them just for today, could it wait a year? Could it wait a week? And could I save until I have my bonus in March or in December? That's the best advice one could give. And like you've actually said as well, sometimes cash is actually king, right? Save a bit long, and the actual cost of the purchase over a period of time lowers if you've saved your money.
Welcome back to Economics Unbound. I'm Frances Hurd, standing in for Tandeka Mbeki, and we've been focusing on the shopping spree around the festive season, crazy credit as well. Of course, it's not only tempting to overspend tomorrow on Black Friday, but over Christmas, and there's more, the January sales, and a very long month in January. The Reserve Bank issued a warning today about unsecured lending being a threat to the financial sector. So consumers are vulnerable, and even the banks perhaps are becoming vulnerable because of what's happening. So how do you avoid going dangerously into the red? To discuss tonight, I'm joined in studio by Jaco van Jaarsveld from Experience South Africa that monitors credit patterns, and from our Seapoint studio by spokesperson for African Unity Life, Christelle Erasmus. Welcome to you both. Jaco, let me start with you. Experian releases this consumer default index. So looking at our tendency as South Africans to take on too much debt, many would argue, that's recent. What are the latest trends?
Francis, thanks for having me. At Experian, we look at the roughly 20 million credit active consumers on a quarterly basis, and we produce an index that looks at what the first-time default rates of consumers are that have credit. So in essence, what we do is the index looks at a consumer who's had credit over their lifetime and have defaulted for the first time.
Okay.
When we look at that, we break it down into the different components. We look at it from a secured lending perspective, which includes home loans and vehicle finance, and we track that segment separate to that of unsecured lending, as you mentioned, from a Reserve Bank the statement that the Reserve Bank made today. And then we look at retail specific as well.
Okay.
And what we've seen in the recent trends is that on the secured lending side, people have become more conservative, and we've seen an improvement in the index. where the default rates, the new defaulters in their secured lending space has actually improved. There's fewer of them.
In the secured lending
Yes,
space?
so on home loans and vehicle asset finance, but I think that correlates directly with the slower demand that there is in the market generally for houses and vehicles.
Okay.
In the retail space, we've seen a similar improvement actually, and that improvement is, however, a function of something very different, and that's the retail lenders being more conservative in granting credit. So on a year-on-year basis, the retailers are pretty good at determining credit risk simply because they play in a bigger market than the banks do. More people can qualify for a retail account.
Okay.
And they're very, very focused on managing this debt responsibly, the credit they grant responsibly. So we've seen an improvement there, even though it's relatively high compared to banking, significantly higher than banking actually. It's still more conservative, and there's an improvement in that.
So who are the people extending credit that the Reserve Bank issues a warning saying unsecured lending, so that's not backed by an asset, is becoming a risk to the whole financial sector?
And it's exactly that component of our index that's shown a deterioration. The biggest deterioration that we've seen was in the unsecured lending space, specifically personal loans and credit card debt.
Yeah.
Personal loans most. And the reason for that is it's in a very competitive market, and a broader portion of the population have access to unsecured banking products. And those banking products are typically today being used for day-to-day management of people's expenses and management of key necessities that they need. And unfortunately, a lot of this money that they're taking up, we see is used in spaces, is used for managing other debt or day-to-day living expenses, which requires credit to finance that, unfortunately.
Sure. Christelle, so I guess this all points to some vulnerable consumers, people taking on credit they shouldn't be taking on, and now we're heading into Black Friday.
Yes, Francis, absolutely. People get crazy over Black Friday, and I just want to touch on something that Jaco also said, is that regarding loans, it's being we see it every day. It's being provided via SMS, on our cell phone banking, emails. It's so easily accessible for each and every individual that people don't know what they're letting themselves in for, and they take these loans, and that's what they use for Black Friday and for the holiday season, just to get in January, and then they are totally in trouble because they didn't provide for that.
Yeah. Well, you've worked on financial literacy, even amongst young people. So you're saying that awareness is not growing. I mean, you take out a personal loan and your interest is going to be huge usually.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that people tend to not ask and that they don't know when they take on a personal loan, or if they take out a credit card, because the interest rates can be up to 28%, which is quite a lot of money. So it's really important to stress that people should not create debts for days like Black Friday or even for the holidays, because come January, you're going to have a problem for not just January, but for the months thereafter when you have to pay it back.
Yeah. Well, Jaco, so tomorrow people will be on the shopping spree. Do we know sort of what percentage will be spending on credit where they shouldn't be, and what percentage will be buying responsibly? Can we tell that?
Yeah, it's difficult to predict what people are going to do before it actually happens, but there's a bigger need for credit based on the tough economic environment we find ourselves in. So we do see that there would potentially be an increase in spend on credit. Is it necessarily bad as long as it's controlled and people buy what's necessary and not what's not necessary? Then it's a good manner of building yourself a stable future credit record that results in being able to get access to secured lending and wealth generating assets down the line.
Yeah.
And that's the most important piece of advice to consumers. I have teenage daughters myself, and to try and convince them to not spend money on Black Friday is it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
The only piece of advice you can give them is just don't go overboard and don't waste money. Be very careful in what you buy, and when you buy it, make sure you can afford paying that back. Teenage daughters, I have to pay it back, but at least it's a bit of advice for other consumers.
What Christelle is saying is there's just not that awareness of the financial products that can get you into trouble down the line. Why aren't we there yet?
So the one thing that is very obvious when we look at the data, consumers are very interest rate insensitive. They take the credit and they take it for a need. They don't look at what it's going to cost them most of the time when you look at unsecured lending. there's a segment in the market which is the more mature, older population that came through their studies, etc., and they looked at it from that perspective, were raised in be careful of the interest component, where we've seen that the new generations and the younger entrants or the new entrants into the market, the credit needy, are interest insensitive because they need the money to live from a day-to-day basis. And therefore, as much as we like to advise people to be careful of high interest rates, I think we need to educate them in the total cost of credit as opposed to just the interest component thereof.
So that is so sad. Christelle, do you concur that younger people, instead of society becoming more aware of interest rates and the trouble you can get yourself into, that we're becoming less aware? That's a huge concern.
Francis, absolutely. It is a great concern. That's why we, as African Unity, try to really teach the children to break that cycle. We want to show them how to do a budget, when they open a bank account, what to look out for. We try to teach them the basics so that they don't repeat their parents' mistakes, because that's the big problem. It's a vicious cycle of children not learning from their parents what they're supposed to learn about finance and managing their money. So if we can, for some or another, get that right, then we might have a good chance in bettering the situation of the debt in our country. So
what is your advice to everybody tomorrow if you're thinking of buying furniture on credit? I mean, how do you figure out if you're actually getting a real discount when you do have to pay that off? What should you consider?
Well, the best tips that I can give is you have to make a list. I want to touch on what some of the other people also said, is you must have a list of what you really need. If you really want to buy that big item, you should have actually saved for it. But if you have to buy it, make sure that you budget. If you're going to pay it off, that's also fine. But you must make sure that it's going to fit into your budget for the next 3 to 6 months or a year, or how many long time you need to pay it off. So make sure that you budget for it. I always say that the heart of your household finance is your budget. If that budget is not there and you're not using it, you're going to get in trouble, or you're going to spend money that you don't have, or you're going to neglect your other priorities that you have. So it's very important to budget and make sure that you can afford it, and then you should actually be fine. Then you can go for your Black Friday shopping. As Jaco said, you can't tell them not to buy. They are going to buy, but just do so responsibly.
Jaco, is that spiralling out of control? You were saying that actually there's a history. We just used to do it later in the year. Black Friday has moved everything forward.
Yeah, so I think there's a bigger correlation between the general economic environment and consumers being under in more distress than there is as a result of additional credit. As I mentioned earlier off the air, there's the default rates that we see as a result of Black Friday happened exactly the same in the previous years prior to Black Friday. It just happened a bit later. It was spent over a period of time as opposed to one day, and the defaults happen at a later stage anyway. There's a seasonal trend in terms of people spend at specific times, whether it's Black Friday, it used to be Christmas, whether it's Easter, and then typically right after that spend, 2, 3, 4 months after that, you see the default rates increase. You see them improve in the run-up as people pay these debts down. And from that perspective, is it any worse than it used to be? It is, but it's a function, in my view, of the credit of the general economic environment, as opposed to people taking on more credit.
We've been hearing this for a while, people using credit cards to buy groceries because they have to. So that's the overall milieu that we're in.
Absolutely, and it's using credit to fund something that's a short-term requirement. You can only fund short-term requirements so many times through long-term credit. And that is the challenge, and that's the thing that consumers should always look at. If you're going to buy something and you need credit to do it, use the credit, but make sure you pay back that credit over the shortest possible time that you can within your means. So if you don't take too much that it takes you too long to pay it back, take the credit, pay it back as quick as you can, because that by default will result in you saving on the interest costs anyway.
And I mean, you can use the rewards on credit cards as well. Christelle, do you agree with that advice? If you are going to take credit, just know how long it'll take you to pay back?
Absolutely. If you know exactly how long it's going to take you to pay it back, then you can obviously budget for it. and then it should actually be, it can be a good buy. So just make sure that you plan. It's really important that you plan your finances and that you budget every month. December or Black Friday shouldn't be any different to any of the other months in the year. You should still do your monthly budget. You must keep to it. It's no use in doing a budget and then you not use it. I always say, even if you have to stick it on your fridge, but use it. If you're going to do it and forget about it, it's not going to work. It's like exercise. You have to do it regularly for it to really work.
Yeah, and people will walk in and see your budget on the fridge. Christelle, how many of the deals, the so-called deals, do you think are worth it?
I think quite a lot of them are quite good, but as one of the previous people also said, you must do your homework and make sure that it's a real good deal and not just a normal special, because retailers have a lot of specials, but not all of them are Black Friday specials, which is supposed to be the much better ones. So do your homework and make sure that that item hasn't been on a special for that same price previously, and also to see if that's the best deal. And once again, it must be something that you need. It doesn't help that you buy a TV for, say, 5,000 Rand, and you save apparently 3,000 Rand, but remember, you still spend 5,000 Rand that you didn't plan on doing so. So make sure that it's really something that will be worth your while and your money.
This is out of the scope of your research, Jaco, but do you get a sense retailers are tricking us?
I think it's less retailers tricking us through pricing. It's retailers influencing through influencers. And the fact of the matter is retail, the trend in the retail industry has fundamentally changed. The days that retail trade is being influenced by when the mother decides where she wants to shop, the kids and the parents went with them. The market has changed fundamentally, and that is now influenced through influencers that communicate with the youngsters, the teenagers, through the platforms that they like engaging through, and the teenagers now direct spend at the retailers that they decide to go to on the back of what the influencers suggest. And we can see that in loyalty programs as well. We run a big loyalty, we've got a loyalty department part to our business, and we can clearly see that the entire focus is on this young generation X and generation Y, the Gen Zs and the Gen Xs, and say, well, the easiest way to get them to spend is catch them when they're online and get the influencers to influence them to spend what you want them to spend. And that's how marketing works these days. And the parents just follow. So for us as parents, it's continuously give them advice, budget, understand that money doesn't grow on trees. But keep an eye on the influencers.
And look, you mentioned something that's not a bad side, the rewards program. So if you are shopping, you should at least use or know where you'll get the best rewards. I mean, try and manipulate it effectively for yourself.
What we've seen in the market as well is that historically a person would typically have between we've seen on average 1 to 1.5 credit cards in a consumer's wallet about 10 years ago. There's at least 2.5 to 3 credit cards per wallet today. However, the average total spend or the total spend across those 3 cards have only marginally increased. And the reason for that is the loyalty programs. If you're going to go to a specific shop that has a loyalty program that gives you value, the entire what's in it for me drives consumer spend as opposed to may I please have your credit product. And that's another reason why there's this big drive from retailers, banks, to get influencers to sell their product. Because it's no longer the demand for credit that drives the take-up of the product. It is the what's in it for me from the consumer, which is really good.
So we're bad about interest, but savvy about rewards, at least.
Absolutely. Consumers are very savvy when it comes. So a good rewards program is always good for a credit provider.
All right. Thank you for the chat this evening. That was Jaco van Jaarsveld from Experience South Africa and Christelle Erasmus from African Unity Life. And from me and the team, that was Economics Unbound. Tandeka back with you next week. We leave it there. And remember, you can write to us at tvbusiness@sabc.co.za. Your views will be appreciated. Give us tips and ideas. And from me, that's good night. Ciao.
Overspending in December wouldn't be that much of an issue if January wasn't such an expensive month. I hope that when you spend during the festive season, dear viewer, you don't forget that you still have to pay household accounts such as lights and water in the next year, and also other costs such as uniforms and school fees. It is good night from the Economics Unbound team.